Hello, my dear students. Welcome you all to Sri Jain Rank Zone classes. I am your mentor and your friend for the subject biology, and I will be taking the zoology part, that is animal science. My dear students, in the last lecture, we discussed about the conduction pathway of heart. We discussed about the cardiac cycle. Today, we are going to start with the volumes of blood related with the cardiac cycle and the phases of cardiac cycle. The phases of cardiac cycle, they are traced by a very important diagnostic method which is known as what? ECG, electrocardiograph. There is another term, electrocardiograph. Electrocardiograph is a machine, is an instrument, and electrocardiogram is a recorded data, which help us to understand about the different phases of cardiac cycle, that is depolarization, repolarization, and hyperpolarization. The atrial systole, it begins with the atrial contraction, which forces blood into ventricles. It is represented by P wave. The P wave of ECG is representing the atrial depolarization or atrial systole. Then comes the ventricular systole, which is the first phase. It is also two categories, early and late. Ventricular contraction pushes AV valves closed, and because of ventricular systole, the semilunar valves will open in the second phase. So the QRX complex, it represents ventricular depolarization or ventricular systole. So systole basically represents the depolarization, and the relaxation or the diastolic period is represented by repolarization. T wave represents the ventricular repolarization. Okay, the ventricular diastole is also early and late, 0.5 second, and atrial systole and ventricular systole is of 0.3 second. Ventricular diastole is of zero point 0.5 second, followed by atrial systole. So ventricular diastole, ventricular systole, and again then ventricular diastole. Okay, so they all are represented by a graphical representation on a paper which is known as what? Electrocardiogram, and the machine which helps to record it is electrocardiograph. The volumes of the blood related with the cardiac cycle are as follows. During diastolic period, filling of the ventricles normally increases the volume of each ventricle to about 120 milliliters, 120 ml. This volume is known as end diastolic volume. End diastolic volume, which is around 120 ml. Okay. Then as the ventricles becomes empty during the systole, the volume decreases to about 70 liters. This becomes 70 liters, 70 ml, sorry, which is called stroke volume. So 70 ml is stroke volume. The volume of the blood pumped by each ventricle in the aorta in one stroke is known as what? Stroke volume. The remaining volume in each ventricle is now about 50 ml, is called end systolic volume. Now it further decreases to 50 ml. That is known as what? End systolic volume. Okay. The fraction of end diastolic volume which is ejected out is called ejectional fraction, usually around 60% or 7 by 12 part. Ejection fraction, which is around 60% of the total cardiac output or 7 by 12 part. Ejection fraction is equal to, it is equal to stroke volume upon end diastolic volume divided by end diastolic volume. Okay, so ejection fraction is calculated as stroke volume upon end diastolic volume. Now, cardiac output. The volume of blood pumped by each ventricle per minute is called cardiac output. It is determined by multiplying the heart rate with the volume of blood ejected by each ventricle during each beat, which is called stroke volume, that is 70 ml. Cardiac output is equal to heart rate into stroke volume. Heart rate is 72 beats per minute and stroke volume is 70 ml of 0.08 liter per beat, that is 5.5 liters per minute, that is the cardiac output. Cardiac index is the minute volume per meter square of the body surface area. Its normal value is 3.3 liter per minute per meter square. The volume of blood pumped by each ventricle per minute is called cardiac output. It is determined by multiplying the heart rate with the volume of the blood ejected by each ventricle during each beat, which is called stroke volume, that is 70 ml. Cardiac output is equal to heart rate into stroke volume. Stroke volume is 70 ml, okay, or we can say 0.08 liter per beat into 72 beats per minute, that comes 5.5 liters per minute. You can also calculate is like 72 beats per minute into 70 ml of stroke, that is around 5000 ml or 5 liters. Okay, cardiac index is the minute volume per meter square of body surface area. Its normal value is 3.3 liter per minute per meter square. That is cardiac index. Now comes the regulation of heartbeat. Center of the heartbeat regulation is located in medulla oblongata, brainstem. The center of heartbeat regulation is located at medulla oblongata, brainstem. Neural regulation. The cardiac center lies in the medulla oblongata of the brain. The cardiac center is formed of cardio-inhibitor and cardio-accelerated parts. The former decreases the rate of heartbeat, that is cardio-inhibitory action. Cardio-inhibitory action. And the later part accelerates it. The cardioinhibitory is connected with the heart through vagus nerve. It carries the parasympathetic nerve fibers and cardioaccelerator through sympathetic nerve fibers. Sensory fibers extended from the receptors present in the superior vena cava, aorta, and carotid sinus to the cardiovascular center in medulla oblongata. So the nervous control says the cardiac center, that is neural center, which regulates the heartbeat, is found in the medulla oblongata of the brain. It can moderately influence the cardiac function through autonomic nervous system. The cardiac center has two units, cardioaccelerator and cardioinhibitory. From the cardioaccelerator center, a pair of sympathetic nerves go into SA node. Okay, so cardioaccelerated part basically helps with the sympathetic nervous system, sympathetic nerve fibers which go into SA node. The neural signals through the sympathetic nerves can increase the rate of the heartbeat, the strength of ventricular contraction, and thereby increasing the cardiac output. The impulse received from the aorta and carotid sinuses decreases the heart rate, whereas the impulse received from vena cava increases the heart rate. Impulse which are received from vena cava increases the heart rate, and impulses which are received from carotid sinuses and aorta decreases the heart rate. So please remember these 2 points. Cardio-inhibitory center is through vagus nerve, which carries parasympathetic nerve fibers, and cardio-accelerated part from the sympathetic fibers, which directly innervates the SA node. Okay. Parasympathetic nerve fibers, acetylcholine is secreted, which decreases the heart rate, speed of conduction of action potential, and cardiac output. So please remember this point as well, that cardio-inhibitory is because of the secretion of acetylcholine, which decreases the conduction of impulse, decreases the cardiac output, and action potential. Hormonal regulation. Adrenaline and non-adrenaline hormones are secreted by the medulla of the adrenal glands. Noradrenaline accelerates the heartbeat under normal conditions, whereas adrenaline does this function at the time of emergency. Adrenaline and noradrenaline hormones are secreted by the medulla of the adrenal gland. Noradrenaline accelerates the heartbeat under normal conditions, while adrenaline does this function at the time of emergency. These hormones directly influence the SA node. Thyroxine hormone secreted by thyroid gland increases oxidative metabolism of the body cells. This requires more oxygen, more metabolic rate, and thus indirectly increases the heartbeat. So one pair of hormone is adrenaline and noradrenaline, which are secreted from medulla of the adrenal gland. Noradrenaline accelerates the heartbeat under normal conditions, whereas adrenaline does this function at the time of emergency. These hormones directly influence the SA node. Thyroxine hormone secreted by thyroid glands increases oxidative metabolic reactions of the body cells. This requires more oxygen and thus indirectly increases the heartbeat. Body temperature also affects the pacemaker. Just 10-degree rise of temperature increases with exercise to provide additional oxygen and food to the muscles. So body temperature also affects the pacemaker, that is SA node, to influence the or to regulate the heartbeat. Okay. So adrenaline increases the heart rate, noradrenaline increases the heart rate, thyroxine increases the heart rate. Sympathetic nervous system increases the heart rate, parasympathetic decreases the heart rate, vagal stimulation increases the acetylcholine, also decreases the heart rate. Now comes electrocardiogram, ECG. Okay, ECG is a graph recorded of the elastic current produced. It is the graph recorded by the elastic current produced by the excitation of cardiac muscles. The instrument used to record the changes in the electrocardiograph. Weller in 1887 first recorded the electrocardiogram, but Inthoven 1906 studied ECG in detail and got the Nobel Prize. He is also considered as father of electrocardiography. ECG is a graph recorded by of the elastic current produced by excitation of the cardiac muscles. The instrument used to record the changes in the electrocardiograph. Wheeler in 1887 first recorded the electrocardiogram, but Inthoven in 1906 studied ECG in detail and got Nobel Prize. He is also considered as father of electrocardiography. A normal ECG composed of P wave, QRX wave or QRS complex and T wave. The letters are arbitrarily selected and do not stand for any particular words. The P wave is a small upward wave that indicates the depolarization of the atrial contraction. It is caused by the activation of SA node. It is caused by the activation of SA node. QRS complex begins after the fraction of second of the P wave. It begins as a small downward deflection of Q and continues as a large upright and triangular wave ending as downward wave S at its base. It represents ventricular depolarization or ventricular contraction. So P wave represents atrial depolarization or atrial contraction. QRS complex or wave represents ventricular contraction. The T wave is a dome-shaped wave which indicates ventricular repolarization or ventricular relaxation. Each large square represents zero point 0.2 second of time interval. Normal PR interval is 0.12 to 2.2 second. QRS complex duration is 0.12 second. Normal QT interval is 0.4 second. So the intervals are like this. First is the PR interval, which is mentioned. Then is QT interval. Then is ST interval. Then RR interval. Okay. So these are different types of intervals. PR interval 0.12 to zero point 0.2 second. QRS complex duration is 0.12 second. Normal QT interval is zero point 0.4 second. Enlargement of P wave indicates enlargement of atria. If the P wave gets enlarged, it indicates enlargement of atria. During atherosclerotic heart diseases and rheumatic fever, the PR interval is lengthened. PR interval is lengthened. During atherosclerotic heart diseases and rheumatic fever, the PR interval got lengthened, it increases. Okay. This is due to the inflammation of atria and AV node. AV node. Enlarged Q and R waves indicate myocardial infarction, heart attack. Enlarged Q wave or enlarged R wave represents myocardial infarction or heart attack. The ST segment is elevated in acute myocardial infarction and depressed when the heart muscle receives insufficient oxygen. ST segment gets elevated in acute myocardial infarction and depressed when the heart muscle receives insufficient oxygen. T wave is flat when the heart muscles receives insufficient oxygen, as in atherosclerotic diseases, and it may be elevated when the body's potassium level is increased. Okay. So each large square represents zero point 0.2 second of time interval. Normally, PR interval is 0.12 to zero point 0.2 second. Normal QRS complex duration is 0.12 second. Normal QT interval is zero point 0.4 second. Enlargement of P wave indicates enlargement of atria. During atherosclerotic heart diseases and rheumatic fever, PR interval is lengthened. This is due to the inflammation of atria and AV node. The enlarged Q wave, enlarged R wave indicates myocardial infection or heart attack. Okay. ST segment gets elevated in acute myocardial infarction and depressed when the heart muscles receives insufficient oxygen. Insufficient oxygen. T wave is flat when the heart muscles receives insufficient oxygen. In atherosclerotic heart diseases, it may be elevated when body's potassium level is increased. Understood? Now, when the ECG of the person to be recorded, four leads, metal electrodes are attached in the arms and legs. It is done after leaning and putting special jelly, which improves the electrical conduction. With the help of rubber suction cup. An additional electrode is placed on the chest. Now the electrocardiograph is switched on, which detects and amplifies the electric current of the heart and transmits to recording pen. The latter draws a wavy line that is called deflection wave. The importance of ECG is that it gives accurate information about the heart. Therefore, ECG is of great diagnostic importance in the cardiac diseases. In ruling out cardiac diseases, the importance of ECG is commendable and it is unmatchable. Blood pressure. Blood pressure, it is the pressure exerted by the flow of blood on the walls of arteries and measured as millimeters of mercury by the instrument called sphygmomanometer. Reva he discovered sphygmomanometer. It has high systolic value, normal 120 millimeters of mercury, and low diastolic value, that is 80 millimeters of mercury. The difference between two is called pulse pressure. Okay, so the systolic blood pressure is equal to systolic pressure upon diastolic pressure. That is 120 by 80 millimeters of mercury. Okay. The systolic pressure or the pumping pressure, it is the higher limit of blood pressure that shows the state of heart systole contraction. For men, this limit is 120 millimeters of mercury, that is normal. Okay. Diastolic pressure, also known as resting pressure, is the lower limit of blood pressure that shows the state of heart, that is relaxation or expansion of heart. Diastole, for men, this limit is 80 millimeters of mercury. It is sustained rise in arterial blood pressure or high blood pressure with systolic more than 140 millimeters of mercury and diastolic more than 90 millimeters of mercury. If the person is having a systolic blood pressure of more than 140 millimeters of mercury and diastolic pressure of more than 90 millimeters of mercury, then he or she is said to be hypertensive. Okay. The instrument by which we can measure BP is called sphygmomanometer. Okay. In men, BP is measured in the brachial artery of arm. or radial artery. Okay. The difference between blood pressure, systolic and diastolic, 120 minus 80 is comes to be pulse pressure. The pulse is felt in the radial artery present in the wrist of the man. It is also felt in the artery of the neck region. The graph of the pulse of an artery is marked by an instrument known as sphygmograph. Sphygmograph. Pulse pressure is the pressure difference between which generates a pulse. This is systolic minus diastolic, that is 40 millimeters of mercury. Hypertension is the sustained rise in the arterial blood pressure or high blood pressure with systolic more than 140 and diastolic more than 90. The reason is stiffening of the arterial walls due to cholesterol deposition, varicose veins, obesity, toxins, hormones, defective kidney. Hypertension caused by hormones is called. Other forms of hypertension are known as primary hypertension. It accounts to 90% of the cases. Okay. Hypertension simply means what? High blood pressure. Okay. High blood pressure harms three vital organs: heart, brain, and kidney. It makes heart to overwork, due to which congestive heart diseases develops quite early. Okay. Blood pressure of 220 by 180 millimeters of mercury may cause internal hemorrhage due to rupturing of some blood vessel. Cerebral hemorrhage causes stroke or CVA, cerebrovascular cerebrovascular accident. Damage to optic arteries lead to the blindness, while a similar damage to renal vessels called nephritis. It leads to renal failure. Hypotension or hypopoiesis. It is low blood pressure with systolic below 110 millimeters of mercury and diastolic below 70 millimeters of mercury. Hypotension is caused by low metabolic rate, starvation, anemia, chronic vasodilation of arterioles, lower pumping activity, valvular defects, nervous disorders, and Addison's disease. Hypertension is caused by low metabolic rate, starvation, anemia, chronic vasodilation of arterioles, lower pumping activity, valvular defects, nervous disorders, and Addison's disease. Okay, there is a direct relationship between rate of heartbeat and blood pressure. This phenomenon is called Mary's law of heart. There is a direct relationship between increased heartbeat and increased blood pressure. This phenomenon is called Mary's law of heart. Okay. Now we will discuss different disorders which are related to the circulatory system. We have already discussed hypertension and hypotension. Now we are going to discuss about varicose veins. On prolonged stranding or due to the defect in the valves of the veins of the legs, these veins may become dilated. The veins become dilated, tortuous, tortuous, and thickened. Okay, most commonly affected in the saphenous vein. Commonly affected is saphenous vein. Such veins become clearly visible and prominent. Treatment is surgical removal of veins. Treatment is surgical removal. Surgical removal of veins. Varicose veins, the persons who who have a profession of prolonged standing or due to the defect in the walls of the veins of the legs, veins become dilated, tortuous, and thickened. Most commonly affected is saphenous veins. Such veins become clearly visible and prominent. Treatment is surgical removal. Okay. The other is heart failure. Heart failure means the state of the heart. It is the state of the heart when it is not pumping. It is not pumping blood effectively enough to meet the needs of the body. It is sometimes called congestive heart failure. Congestive heart failure. Because congestion of the lungs is one of the main symptoms of this disease. Congestion of lungs is the main symptom. Okay. Heart failure is not same as cardiac arrest. When the heart stops, cardiac arrest is when the heart stops suddenly. Heart stops beating. Okay. In heart failure, the heart basically it is not pumping blood effectively enough to meet the needs of the body. Cardiac arrest is also known as heart attack. Okay. There are three terms. Sorry. There are three terms: heart failure, cardiac arrest, and heart attack. Heart failure, I have already explained. Cardiac arrest when the heart stops beating, or heart attack is when the heart muscle is suddenly damaged by an inadequate blood supply. Cardiac arrest, heart attack when the heart muscle is suddenly damaged by an inadequate blood supply. Okay, is that understood? Yeah, that's good. Then comes heart block. An AV node gets damaged. So contractions do not reach up to ventricles. Contractions do not reach up to ventricles. This event is called heart block. Okay, now comes atherosclerosis and arteriosclerosis. Atherosclerosis. Atherosclerosis, it is the deposition of lipids of cholesterol on the walls. Such deposition are called atheromatous plaque, known as atheromatous plaque. These are the vegetations which get deposited on the, you know, walls of the major arteries. It takes place in the lumen of large and medium-sized arteries of the body. It mainly affects and especially their lumen. Plaques are formed due to the proliferation of smooth muscles, due to proliferation of smooth muscles of the inner wall of the arteries, inner wall of arteries due to platelet derived growth factor, due to platelet derived growth factor. Okay, the plaques are formed due to the proliferation of smooth muscles of the inner wall of the arteries due to platelet derived growth factor, which causes narrowing of arteries. Artery lumen may get blocked, resulting in no blood supply. Artery lumen may get blocked, resulting in no blood supply. Okay, this is atherosclerosis. Now comes arteriosclerosis. Okay, arteriosclerosis. Arteriosclerosis is the hardening of the arteries. It is the hardening of the arteries due to thickening along with the deposition of calcium-based salts, along with the deposition of calcium salts plus cholesterol. Okay, it can take place in medium to small arteries of limbs. It can take place in medium to small arteries, especially of limbs. Okay, there is no formation of plaque, no plaque. Okay, formation occurs. Arteries become stiff and rigid due to calcification. Calcification causes the arteries to become stiff and rigid. So arteries, they lost their elasticity, loss of elasticity. Okay, because of calcification, the arteries become stiff and rigid. Their elasticity is lost. Okay, artery loses its capacity of distension and may rupture. And may rupture. So these are some, disorders which are related to circulatory system. In the next turn, we will be discussing some more disorders like myocardial infarction, okay, and some info I will give you about cerebrovascular accident. Till then, bye bye, take care, stay safe, stay healthy, everyone. Bye bye.